Eutrophication is a multi-step process where high nutrient runoff contaminates a waterway and steps through a process that ultimately leads to a decrease in the dissolved oxygen in that waterway, and ultimately can lead to what we call a dead zone. So I'm going to talk you through that process. So first of all, we have runoff. So runoff, of course, is where you have water that runs downhill into a waterway, gets caught in a waterway. And in this particular case, we've got runoff that's contaminated with nitrogen and phosphorus waste. So nitrogen and phosphorus, perhaps from fertilizer. It may be nitrogen in fecal matter and urine from cattle and other animals. Anyway, it's contaminated water that contains nitrogen and phosphorus that runs downhill into a waterway, and it gets contained in that waterway. So we have water then that has increased amount of nitrogen and phosphorus. Now, as we've said before, nitrogen and phosphorus are required for plants and producers to grow. So we then have an increased production or increase in the biomass of producers. So we are said to have what we call an algal bloom. So the whole or a large part of the waterway might be filled with algae. When that algae dies, it then goes through a process of decomposition and decay. Now, so that decay requires microorganisms and bacteria, etc. And the process of decay requires this bacteria to undergo cellular respiration, and that of course requires them to use oxygen. So these bacteria consume oxygen. So what that means is it takes all of the oxygen out of the water, and we end up with a hypoxic area, or an area with low dissolved oxygen. And then of course, if we've got low oxygen, our consumers that require respiration, so the fish, etc., they can't survive where there's low dissolved oxygen. So we end up with this thing called a dead zone. So I'll just step you through the steps one more time, at this time in a vertical flow chart. First of all, we've got our high nitrogen and phosphorus runoff, and that causes an increase in the producer biomass. So we have an algal bloom, and when that algae dies, we get decomposition, and that decomposition means that we're actually taking oxygen out of the water for the cellular respiration of the bacteria doing the decomposition. Decreased dissolved oxygen, and eventually we have a dead zone.